When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, late afternoon. User, Mysten8. Posted, March 2nd, 1994.
Does a house have to be old to be haunted? I ask because my wife Trudy and I built this house on a parcel of land that had been empty since the Jumano people vanished, and yet there's definitely some kind of something going on. Now, I don't know that what's happening is ghosts exactly, but I've only got so many words to describe these things. Like I said before, Trudy and I had this place built in the early 80s after I finally made some real money. We had intended to raise a family here, but medical complications got in the way, and after taking some time to mourn, we decided to devote our time to animals instead. We turned our 200 acres into a shelter for all creatures, big and small, and while I know it's not the same as having children of our own, we've never wanted for love. As you might imagine, the shelter is a full-time endeavor, and it doesn't leave us a lot of downtime. In recent years, we've managed to increase our revenue and donations to the point where we can have some part-time help come in and give us a little time off. Sometimes I wonder if the things I've seen are actually new, or if they've always been here and I'm only noticing them because of the breathing room we've had lately. The first thing happened when we were in bed. I woke up from a nightmare about something. I don't recall exactly what, and lay there in the dark listening to Trudy's breathing. You know how in horror movies people will see something in the dark, panic, and then realize that the whole time they've been looking at a coat rack or stack of laundry? It was the opposite for me. I woke up and assumed the floral pattern I was seeing in the corner of the room was one of Trudy's dresses hanging on the wall. It was not. When I looked, really looked, I saw that there was a dress in the corner, but it was being worn by a woman I didn't recognize. She was older than us, maybe late 50s, and appeared benign. It was like she was just watching us. When she saw me finally noticing her, she smiled before raising one white-gloved hand and giving a little wave. In an instant, she was gone. Over breakfast the next morning, I told Trudy about what I'd seen, and she gave me the cocked eyebrow look normally reserved for one of my bad ideas. She comes from a religious family and rejected all that outright after leaving home, so the notion of ghosts wasn't one she put much stock in. I pleaded my case as best I could, but she assured me I had to have been dreaming. After all, she said, we're the first people to live here. Of course, we weren't, not really, but I don't know that the Jumano people were big on floral dresses, so I had to concede the point. The next thing to happen wasn't so whimsical and is what finally drove me to this board. When it happened, Trudy was away at her sister's house and I was in the living room kicking up in my easy chair about to take another stab at reading Shogun. One of our dogs, a big black lab named Charlie, was sitting next to me on his bed, loudly snoozing away. It was just before 5 p.m. and I looked up from my book because the light coming through the living room blinds looked wrong. It was too deep and too orange. In the winter, the sun sets here around 5:20, so you expect to see a glow as it goes down, but this was extreme. I got up from my chair and looked outside to see if there was any reason for the change, but nothing looked unusual. Standing in front of the window as I was, the light I'd seen cast against the wall should have been blocked, but when I turned around, it was still there, and I couldn't look away. That orange glow was so strong it practically vibrated, and I felt my stomach start to knot up. Then the edges of the room started to go dark, not the edges of my vision, but the room, as if it was filling up with thick black smoke that blocked out everything but the sick sunset. The knot in my stomach got worse, like I was about to throw up the sandwich and black coffee I'd had for lunch, or maybe just pass out. Just then, Charlie began to bark, and the air pressure in the room changed so quickly, my ears popped. As they did, the darkness receded like it was being sucked up with a vacuum, and the nausea subsided completely. Charlie kept barking, running up to the wall where I'd seen the oversaturated patch of orange light as if he was trying to run it off. It was shrinking, whether because of something he was doing or some other factor I couldn't identify, and within seconds it winked out of existence just like the woman in our bedroom had. When it was finally gone, Charlie gave one final "so there" bark and went back to his bed. I picked up my discarded paperback and flopped down in my chair next to him, feeling exhausted and mystified in equal measure. I haven't been that tired since the early days of the shelter when we were working 12, 14 hours to keep the lights on. Has anyone out there experienced something like this before? Are the two experiences somehow related? My family has no history of mental disturbances, and even if they did, that wouldn't explain Charlie reacting the way he did. And what would have happened if he wasn't here?
Subject, low sun. User, S12 stud. Posted, December 12, 1996.
I just woke up from an awful nightmare. It's almost 4 a.m, and aside from the hum of the computer, all I can hear is the traffic outside and my husband David snoring in the bedroom. The snoring isn't loud, though if he keeps eating cheese at the rate he does, in a few more years, it'll be a different story. In fairness, we've both let ourselves go a little in the last couple of years. You get comfortable with each other, I suppose. You skip a few aerobics classes to catch screenings of your favorite movies at the Met. You make good enough money to treat yourselves to some nice meals that you couldn't afford 10 years ago. It all catches up to you. And then, of course, there was a Y2K bearing down. We used to make jokes like, "Can't miss seeing Jules at gym one more time before the curtain comes down," or "These morels are gonna go to waste once society collapses. Better make sure they find a good home." It used to bug some of our friends who weren't computer savvy. They really thought Y2K was gonna be the end of civilization, but both David and I work in software and knew better. So much effort had been expended in the 10 years leading up to tonight that when we went to the big New Year's Eve block party at 9, it was all about having a good time and secretly people watching to see who was going to freak out as the clocks ticked over. I think that's what bothers me most about the nightmare. I'm not superstitious, but I still hate to start the millennium off on a sour note. I think dreams tell us a lot about where we're at in life, the things we're afraid of, and what we really want, which makes this one even harder to describe, but I'll do my best. Maybe someone here can help me figure it out. It started on a beautiful, clear morning. The sky was the most amazing cerulean blue I have ever seen. I was walking our dog down the street of a small town. That was the first unusual thing because we neither have a dog nor live in a small town, but it felt good. It felt safe, like I had been transplanted into the background of a Norman Rockwell painting. My dog and I were walking alongside a road next to some train tracks when I started to see a white light in the corner of my eye. Something deep inside me said I shouldn't look at it, but the urge to do just that grew within me, to the point where I lost my ability to resist. When I allowed myself to look at the white light, it exploded, filling my entire field of vision. As a little girl, I used to have to take religious education, catechism, my grandmother called it, and the nuns used to teach us that no one could truly see the face of God. If you tried, you'd be blinded by his light, and in the dream, I thought that's what had happened. Even though I've been an atheist ever since I was old enough to know what it meant, I still called out to God, "Restore my sight." The voice spoke to me then, cold, cruel, and inhuman. It said, "I'm not your God, little thing." My sight returned and the light zipped away up into what was now a darkly clouded sky, hanging there like a low sun. My dog was gone and a wind whipped around me. The air filled with a deafening rumble like a freight train was passing between my ears, and I watched as the white light split first into two, then those two into four. Each mitosis came with a physical pain in my chest, a tugging like something was being taken away from me. Two of the huge orbs sped away together, faster than I could track them. The other two separated, vanishing just as quickly in different directions. When they had gone, leaves began to fall around me, blanketing everything in sight. The train sound had stopped at some point, and all I could hear was the soft scraping of dried leaves landing atop one another. I could no longer move. All that was left was to stand there, mute and afraid, as I was slowly buried alive. Then I woke up. When I opened my eyes to see snowflakes drifting past the window, I froze for a second, thinking the nightmare wasn't over. It was David's snoring that tethered me back to reality. The thing of it is, even though I knew I was fully awake, the pulling feeling in my chest remained. It took a minute for me to recognize it as the same feeling I'd had when my grandfather had died, an ache that was equal parts grief, longing, and regret for things not done. It's still here with me now as I type this. Like I said before, I'm not superstitious, and this is all probably residual Y2K worry I picked up from people at the party, but a part of me is convinced something bad is going to happen. I even got up a moment ago to check on David, even though the rhythm of his snoring hadn't changed at all. The sun will be up in a few hours. I should probably call my mom to wish her a Happy New Year and check up on her too. The snow outside has turned to sleet, and I can hear the traffic churning up slush as the mantle clock ticks away. David and I have built a soft, peaceful life here together, and I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I can't help feeling like we won't get the choice. I wish I knew why. If anyone can offer an interpretation of that dream, please let me know.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.